A store clerk accused a black woman for shoplifting. Minutes later, his boss called her CEO. Maya Johnson pulled her beat-up Honda Civic into the parking lot of Greenfield Market, a mid-sized grocery store nestled in the heart of suburban Connecticut. The autumn wind whipped through her natural curls as she stepped out, adjusting her faded jeans and pulling her oversized university sweatshirt tighter around her shoulders. She looked exactly like what she was trying to be today, invisible. It had been 3 months since she'd taken over as CEO of Sterling Retail Corporation, one of the largest grocery chains on the East Coast. 3 months of 14-hour days, hostile board meetings, and the constant weight of proving herself in a role that many believed she didn't deserve. At 34, she was the youngest CEO in the company's history, and certainly the first black woman to hold the position. The pressure was suffocating. This morning, she'd woken up in her penthouse apartment feeling like she couldn't breathe. The marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, and designer furniture that once symbolized her success now felt like prison walls. She needed to remember why she fought so hard to get here in the first place. She needed to see the business from the ground up, the way her customers did. So here she was, dressed down and anonymous, ready to shop like any regular customer at one of their smaller franchise locations. No security detail, no assistant, no corporate entourage. Just Maya, testing the very stores she was responsible for running. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and she stepped into the familiar sight of polished floors and neatly arranged produce. The store was busy for a Thursday afternoon, retirees comparing prices on canned goods, a young mother chasing after her toddler, teenagers grabbing snacks after school. Maya smiled, feeling some of her tension ease. This was what retail was really about, serving people, being part of their daily lives. She grabbed a small basket and began wandering the aisles, making mental notes. The produce looked fresh, the shelves were well stocked, and the store seemed clean and organized. Maybe the franchise was doing better than the reports suggested. "Can I help you find anything?" The voice came from behind her, polite but with an edge that made Maya turn around. A store clerk stood there, probably in his early 30s, with sandy brown hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to be cataloging every detail of her appearance. His name tag read, "Brad, Assistant Manager." His smile didn't reach his eyes, and Maya immediately recognized the look she'd seen too many times before, suspicion masquerading as customer service. "Oh, I'm fine, thank you," Maya replied with a warm smile, hoping to diffuse whatever tension she was sensing. "Just picking up a few things." Brad nodded slowly, but didn't move away. Instead, he began straightening already organized items on a nearby shelf, his eyes never leaving her. Maya felt the familiar knot form in her stomach, but she pushed forward, determined not to let paranoia ruin her fact-finding mission. She selected a package of organic strawberries, checking the price, $6.99, which seemed reasonable for this time of year. As she placed them in her basket, she noticed Brad had followed her, now pretending to check expiration dates on yogurt containers just one aisle over. Maya moved to the cereal aisle, selecting a box of whole grain flakes. Brad appeared again, this time, organizing breakfast bars. When she headed toward the dairy section for milk, he was suddenly very interested in the cheese display. The pattern was unmistakable, and Maya's professional composure began to crack. She'd built her career on reading people and situations, and this was textbook profiling. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was being followed in her own store by her own employee. "Excuse me." Brad's voice was louder now, drawing attention from other shoppers. "I need to ask you to stop." Maya froze, her hand halfway to a gallon of milk. The few other customers in the area began to stare. An elderly woman with a shopping cart full of groceries stopped mid-stride. The young mother she'd seen earlier pulled her child closer, watching the scene unfold. "I'm sorry." Maya turned to face Brad, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I saw you put something in your purse," Brad said, his voice carrying across the dairy section like an announcement. "I'm going to need you to empty your bag." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She glanced around at the growing audience of customers, some pulling out their phones, others whispering to each other. A teenage employee stocking shelves had stopped working entirely, his mouth slightly open as he watched the confrontation unfold. "I haven't put anything in my purse," Maya said calmly, though her heart was pounding. "Everything I've selected is in this basket, as you can see." Brad stepped closer, and Maya caught a whiff of his cologne mixed with nervous sweat. "Ma'am, I watched you slip something into your bag when you thought I wasn't looking. This is a family store, and we take theft very seriously here." "Theft?" The word came out sharper than Maya intended. Several more shoppers had gathered now, forming a loose semicircle around the confrontation. She recognized the mixture of expressions on their faces, some curious, some uncomfortable, some clearly enjoying the drama. "Look, we can handle this easily," Brad continued, his voice taking on a condescending tone that made Maya's jaw clench. "Just show me what's in your purse, and we can clear this whole thing up. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. But if I'm right..." He let the threat hang in the air. Maya looked around at the faces staring at her. In her penthouse office, she commanded respect from CEOs and board members. She'd negotiated million-dollar deals and led company meetings with confidence and authority. But here, dressed in her college sweatshirt and jeans, she was just another black woman being accused of shoplifting in a grocery store. The familiar rage began to build in her chest, not just at Brad, but at the system that made this moment possible. The assumptions, the profiling, the way her success and achievements meant nothing when stripped of their obvious markers. "Sir," Maya said, her voice carrying the authority she'd learned to project in boardrooms, "I am telling you that I have not stolen anything from this store. I have my receipt from the items I selected, which are all in this basket, and I'm happy to pay for them and leave." But she could see in Brad's eyes that he'd gone too far to back down now. With all these witnesses, with phones recording, he couldn't just walk away without losing face. He'd trapped himself in his own prejudice. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist," Brad said, his voice getting louder. "Empty your purse, or I'm calling the police." The threat of police made several customers shift uncomfortably. The elderly woman shook her head and muttered something to herself. The young mother had taken out her phone and was definitely recording now. Maya felt the moment crystallize around her. This was it, the choice between causing a scene and quietly submitting to humiliation. Between protecting her cover and protecting her dignity. She looked directly into Brad's eyes, saw the certainty there, the assumption that he held all the power in this situation. He had no idea that the woman he was accusing owned not just this store, but 47 others just like it across 3 states. "Call your manager," Maya said quietly, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Call your manager right now." Brad blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand the situation." "Call your manager," Maya repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Now. Something in her voice must have penetrated Brad's confidence, because he hesitated for the first time since the confrontation began. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something was about to shift. Maya reached into her purse, the same purse Brad had accused her of stealing into, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency as she opened her contacts and found the number she needed. "Since you won't call your manager," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the dairy section, "I'll call mine." Brad frowned, confusion replacing some of his earlier certainty. "Your manager?" Maya hit the call button and raised the phone to her ear. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Maya. How's the store visit going?" Maya looked directly at Brad as she responded, her voice calm and clear. "Hi, David. I'm at the Greenfield location, and I think we need to have a conversation about employee training." The color began to drain from Brad's face as understanding slowly dawned. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. "I'll be right there," came the voice from the phone, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Give me 5 minutes." Maya ended the call and slipped her phone back into her purse. She looked around at the faces staring at her, some confused, some beginning to understand, Brad looking like he might be sick. "Your manager will be here in 5 minutes," Maya announced to the crowd. I think we should all wait and see what he has to say. The next 4 minutes felt like an eternity. Maya stood calmly beside her basket of unpurchased groceries, while Brad shifted nervously from foot to foot, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, drawn by whispered conversations and the unmistakable tension that filled the air like electricity before a storm. Who do you think she called? Whispered the elderly woman to another customer, not bothering to lower her voice much. Maybe her lawyer? Suggested the young mother, still recording with her phone. Girl, if I were her, I'd sue this whole place. Brad's face had gone from confident red to worried pale to slightly green. He kept glancing at Maya, then at the growing crowd, then toward the front of the store as if willing his manager to appear and somehow make this situation go away. Ma'am, he said quietly, taking a step closer to Maya. Listen, maybe we can just… No. Maya cut him off, her voice gentle but firm. We're going to wait. A teenager near the back of the crowd had started live streaming on social media. Y'all, something crazy is happening at Greenfield Market right now, he whispered to his phone. This lady just got accused of shoplifting, and now she's waiting for the manager like she owns the place or something. Maya noticed the live stream but didn't react. She'd learned long ago that trying to control information in the digital age was like trying to hold water in your hands. Better to let the truth speak for itself. The automatic doors at the front of the store whooshed open, and David Martinez, the regional manager for this district, hurried through. He was a man in his late 40s with graying temples and the slightly frazzled look of someone who'd dropped everything to race across town. His eyes scanned the crowd until they found Maya, and his expression immediately shifted from confusion to understanding to barely concealed panic. Maya, he said, slightly out of breath as he approached. I got here as fast as I could. What's the situation? The crowd pressed closer. Brad looked like he might faint. This is Brad, Maya said calmly, gesturing toward the assistant manager who now looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. He accused me of shoplifting and demanded that I empty my purse in front of all these customers. David's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been fear. He looked from Maya to Brad to the crowd of customers, many of whom were still recording with their phones. What? David stammered, then seemed to collect himself. Brad, what exactly happened here? Brad opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. He looked around at all the faces staring at him, at the phones pointed in his direction, at Maya standing calm and dignified despite everything he'd put her through. I saw her, he began weakly, then stopped. The lie he'd been so confident about minutes earlier now seemed impossible to voice in front of everyone. You thought what? David's voice was sharp now, the voice of a manager who was realizing his company was about to face a public relations nightmare. I thought I saw her put something in her purse, Brad whispered, the words barely audible. Did you see her put something in her purse? David asked, his voice carrying clearly across the dairy section. I thought I did. That's not what I asked. Did you actually see her steal something, or did you think you saw her steal something? The distinction hung in the air like a judgment. Brad's shoulders slumped. I thought I did. David closed his eyes briefly, as if praying for patience or divine intervention. When he opened them, he looked directly at Maya with an expression that mixed professional respect with personal mortification. Maya, I am so incredibly sorry. This is absolutely unacceptable, and I want you to know that we will be addressing this immediately and thoroughly. Maya? Brad's voice cracked slightly on her name. Who is Maya? David turned to face Brad, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority and consequence. Brad, I'd like you to meet Maya Johnson. She's the CEO of Sterling Retail Corporation. The effect of these words was immediate and dramatic. Brad's face went completely white, and he actually staggered backward as if he'd been physically struck. Several customers gasped audibly. The teenager with the live stream nearly dropped his phone. Oh my God! Whispered the young mother. She owns this place. The CEO? Said the elderly woman, looking Maya up and down with new appreciation. Well, I'll be damned. Brad's mouth opened and closed several times like a fish out of water. But you're wearing normal clothes? Maya finished for him, her voice still calm but with an edge that could cut glass. Yes, Brad. I'm wearing normal clothes because I'm a normal person who wanted to shop in one of our stores like a normal customer. I didn't. I mean, I couldn't have known, Brad stammered. Known what? Maya asked. That I was the CEO? Would that have changed how you treated me? Brad started to nod, then caught himself as he realized the trap in the question. If he said yes, he was admitting he treated people differently based on their perceived status. If he said no, he was admitting he would have treated the CEO of his company the same way he just treated her. This is bad, he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. Yes, Maya agreed. It is bad. But not for the reasons you think. David stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. Maya, if we could perhaps discuss this privately. No, Maya said firmly. This happened publicly, in front of all these customers. They deserve to hear what comes next. She looked around at the faces staring at her, some curious, some sympathetic, some clearly enjoying the drama of watching someone in authority get their comeuppance. My name is Maya Johnson, and I am the CEO of Sterling Retail Corporation, which owns this store and 46 others like it. I came here today dressed like any regular customer because I wanted to see how our stores really operate when no one thinks the boss is watching. She paused, letting that sink in. I've gotten my answer, the crowd murmured among themselves. Several more people had joined the audience, drawn by the commotion and the whispered explanations of what was happening. Now, Maya continued, we're going to go somewhere private and discuss what happens next. But first, I want everyone here to know that this kind of treatment is not acceptable in any Sterling retail store, and we will be taking immediate action to ensure it never happens again. She looked directly at Brad, who was now visibly shaking. David, please escort Mr. Brad and me to your office. We have a lot to discuss. As Maya, David, and a visibly shaken Brad made their way toward the back of the store, the crowd of customers didn't disperse. Instead, they seemed to grow larger and more animated, like spectators at a sporting event who'd just witnessed an incredible upset. Did you see his face when she said CEO? Laughed a middle-aged man to his shopping companion. I thought he was gonna pass out right there in the dairy aisle. The teenager with the live stream was practically bouncing with excitement. Yo, chat is going crazy right now, he whispered into his phone. We got like 3,000 people watching. This is about to blow up everywhere. The young mother who'd been recording approached the elderly woman who'd witnessed the whole thing. Excuse me, did you see everything that happened? Every bit of it, the older woman replied with satisfaction. That young man followed her around like she was some kind of criminal, just because of how she looked. Well, he sure learned his lesson today. Would you mind if I interviewed you for my TikTok? Asked a college-aged girl who'd arrived during the revelation. This is exactly the kind of story people need to hear. Meanwhile, other customers were taking out their phones, not to record, but to share what they just witnessed. Text messages flew across the digital airwaves. OMG, you won't believe what just happened at Greenfield Market. And just saw a store clerk accuse the CEO of his own company of shoplifting. Behind them, Maya walked calmly toward the store offices, but her mind was racing. She discreetly pulled out her phone and opened her voice recorder app, making sure to angle it so neither David nor Brad could see. She'd learned long ago that in situations like this, having an accurate record was essential. Her finger pressed record just as they reached the door marked Management. After you, David said, his voice strained with the kind of politeness that comes from barely controlled panic. As they disappeared into the back office, the crowd finally began to thin, but not before several customers made a point of speaking to remaining employees. Is this how you treat all your black customers? One woman asked a teenage cashier who'd been watching from behind her register. No, ma'am, the cashier replied quickly. Brad. He's just been really weird lately. Always suspicious of people. Some of us have complained about it. Back in the main store, 3 employees had gathered near the customer service desk, speaking in hushed tones. I knew this was gonna happen someday, said Janet, a shift supervisor who'd worked there for 12 years. Brad's been targeting customers since he got promoted to assistant manager 6 months ago. Always black folks, always young people. I reported it twice to David, but nothing ever got done. Remember that college kid last month? Added Marcus, one of the stock clerks. Brad followed him around for 20 minutes, then accused him of stealing energy drinks. Kid had his receipt and everything, but Brad still made him prove it. And that lady with the stroller 2 weeks ago, chimed in Sarah from the pharmacy counter. Brad was convinced she had baby formula hidden under her blanket. Made her wake up her sleeping baby to prove she wasn't stealing. It was horrible. Meanwhile, outside in the parking lot, several customers who'd witnessed the confrontation were being interviewed by others who were eager to share the story on social media. What did you think when you first saw it happening? Asked the TikTok girl, holding her phone up to capture the elderly woman's response. Honey, I've seen this same story play out for 70 years. The woman replied, her voice heavy with experience. Young black woman, minding her own business, getting followed around by some clerk who thinks he knows what she's up to. Only difference this time is she had the power to do something about it. But were you surprised when you found out she was the CEO? Surprised? Child, I was delighted. You should have seen that boy's face drop when he realized he'd messed with the wrong woman. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected packages. Inside the store, news of the incident was spreading among the staff like wildfire. Employees were pulling out their phones during breaks, texting friends and family about what had happened. You're not gonna believe this, typed one cashier to her sister. Some dude just accused the CEO of our company of shoplifting. She was here undercover and everything. He's probably gonna get fired. The story was already beginning to mutate and expand as it spread. By the time it reached the third person in each chain, Maya had become a millionaire businesswoman shopping in disguise, and Brad had become a racist store manager who got exposed on social media. 20 minutes after the confrontation, the first social media posts were going live. The teenager's live stream had captured the moment of revelation, and clips were already being shared across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram with hashtags like #KarmaIsReal, #CEO_justice, and #shoplifting_accusation. Y'all need to see this. Read one viral tweet with a video attached. Store clerk racially profiles a customer and finds out she's the CEO of the whole company. The second-hand embarrassment I feel for this man. Another post on Instagram stories showed a screenshot of local news outlets already picking up the story. Breaking. Viral video shows grocery store employee falsely accusing company CEO of shoplifting. The young mother who'd recorded the initial confrontation was editing her footage in her car, adding text overlays that read, "When racial profiling backfires spectacularly." And, "This is why we need to record everything." But it wasn't just social media where the story was spreading. Inside the store, employees were fielding calls from friends and family who'd already seen the videos online. "Greenfield Market, this is Sarah, how can I help you?" answered the pharmacy clerk, only to hear her cousin's excited voice on the other end. "Girl, is it true that some manager at your store just accused the CEO of shoplifting? My entire Facebook timeline is going crazy about it." Even the local news stations were beginning to take notice. A reporter from Channel 8 News was already in her car, heading toward the store after seeing the live stream and multiple social media posts about the incident. Inside the management office, Maya could hear the buzz of activity from the store floor. She knew that by now, the story was probably spreading far beyond the four walls of the Greenfield Market. In the age of smartphones and social media, a story like this could go viral within hours. She glanced at her phone and saw she already had 17 missed calls from her assistant, her head of public relations, and several board members. Word was traveling fast in corporate circles too. "David," she said calmly, as Brad sat slumped in a chair looking like he wished the floor would open up and swallow him. "I think we need to discuss not just what happened here today, but what's going to happen in the next few hours when this story goes national." The management office felt cramped with 3 people inside, the air thick with tension and the lingering smell of Brad's nervous sweat. Maya took a seat across from Brad, while David positioned himself behind his desk like a barrier between his corporate superior and his failing employee. "Before we begin," Maya said, her voice calm but authoritative, "I want to review exactly what happened out there. David, do you have access to the security footage?" David nodded quickly, grateful for something concrete to focus on. "Yes, we have cameras throughout the store. Let me pull up the feed from the dairy section." His fingers moved rapidly across his computer keyboard, and within moments, a grainy black and white video appeared on his monitor. "Can you turn the screen so we can all see it?" Maya asked. As David adjusted the monitor, Brad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Do we really need to?" "Yes," Maya cut him off firmly. "We absolutely need to watch this." The footage began with Maya entering the dairy section, her movements casual and unhurried. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. On screen, she could be seen selecting a gallon of milk, examining the expiration date, and placing it in her basket. Her hands never went near her purse. "There," David said, pointing at the screen. "That's when you entered the dairy section." They watched as Brad appeared on camera, pretending to organize cheese displays while keeping his eyes fixed on Maya. The body language was unmistakable. He was hunting, not working. "Brad," Maya said quietly, not taking her eyes off the screen, "what exactly did you see that made you suspicious?" Brad's voice came out as barely a whisper. I thought you looked out of place." "Out of place how?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. On screen, Maya continued shopping normally, her actions perfectly innocent and unremarkable. "Your clothes," Brad finally admitted. "You were dressed casually. And you kept looking around like you were checking to see if anyone was watching." Maya paused the video and turned to face Brad directly. "I was looking around because I was evaluating the store layout, the cleanliness, the customer service. I was doing my job. But you assumed I was casing the place for theft." "Why?" Brad's face flushed red. "I don't know. I had a feeling." "A feeling based on what, specifically?" "Maya," David interjected nervously. "Perhaps we should." "No, David. This is important." Maya's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to getting answers. "Brad, I need you to be honest with me. What gave you a feeling that I was going to steal something?" The security footage continued playing in the background, showing Maya's completely normal shopping behavior. Brad watched himself on screen, following her with the single-minded focus of a predator tracking prey. Brad started then stopped. He looked at Maya, really looked at her for the first time since this ordeal began. "I don't know how to say this without sounding. Just say it. You're young and black, and you were dressed like..." He trailed off, the words dying in his throat as he realized what he was admitting to. "Like what, Brad?" "Like someone who might not be able to afford to shop here." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. David's face went pale, and he started to say something, but Maya held up a hand to stop him. "So you profiled me," Maya said simply. "You made assumptions about my character, my intentions, and my financial situation based entirely on my race and my clothing. Is that correct?" Brad's shoulders sagged. "I guess. Yes." Maya rewound the footage and played it again from the beginning. "Now watch this again, and tell me exactly when you saw me steal something." They watched the entire sequence again. Maya's hands were visible throughout. She never reached into her purse, never concealed anything, never exhibited any behavior that could reasonably be interpreted as theft. "I didn't," Brad whispered. "I didn't see you steal anything. Then why did you accuse me?" "Because I was sure you were going to." The honesty of this admission seemed to surprise even Brad himself. Maya leaned back in her chair, processing not just his words but the implications behind them. "David," she said, "has Brad received any training on unconscious bias or customer profiling?" David shuffled through some papers on his desk. "We had a company-wide seminar about 6 months ago. All employees were required to attend. Brad, do you remember that seminar? Yes, ma'am. And what did you learn from it? Brad struggled to find words. That we shouldn't. That we should treat all customers the same. But you didn't treat me the same as other customers, did you? No. Maya stood up and walked to the window that looked out onto the store floor. She could see customers moving through the aisles, employees restocking shelves, the normal rhythm of retail business. But she knew that what had happened today was far from normal. Brad, I want you to understand something, she said, turning back to face him. This isn't just about you making a mistake. This is about a pattern of behavior that damages our customers, our reputation, and our business. What do you mean? David asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. David, in the last 6 months, how many complaints have you received about Brad's treatment of customers? David's silence was answer enough. How many? Maya pressed. 3 formal complaints. Maybe more informal ones. All involving customers of color? Yes. Maya turned to Brad, whose face had gone ashen. So this isn't the first time you've targeted customers based on their appearance. This is a pattern. I was just trying to prevent theft, Brad said weakly. This store has shrinkage issues, and I was told to be vigilant. Who told you to be vigilant in this specific way? Brad hesitated, then said, Derek Morrison, the manager at the Riverside location. He said some stores in the chain were being too soft, that we needed to crack down on certain types of customers. Maya and David exchanged a look. Derek Morrison was known in corporate circles as someone who pushed aggressive sales tactics, but this was the first Maya had heard about him encouraging profiling. Derek told you to target specific types of customers? Maya asked. Not in those exact words, but... Yes. He said we needed to pay special attention to people who looked like they might be trouble. Maya felt a cold anger settling in her stomach. This wasn't just about one employee's prejudice. This was about systemic encouragement of discriminatory behavior. Brad, she said finally, do you understand that what you did today wasn't just wrong, it was illegal? Illegal? You detained me without cause, accused me of a crime I didn't commit, and created a hostile environment based on my race. That's not just bad customer service. That's discrimination, and it opens both you and this company up to serious legal consequences. Brad looked like he might be sick. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did happen. And now we have to deal with the consequences. 3 days later, Maya sat in her corner office on the 32nd floor of Sterling Retail's corporate headquarters in Hartford, Connecticut. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but her attention was focused on the laptop screen displaying a company-wide video conference with over 800 employees from 47 stores across 3 states. The Greenfield incident had exploded across social media exactly as she'd predicted. #GroceryStoreJustice was trending on Twitter, the original live stream had been viewed over 2 million times, and news outlets from CNN to local stations had picked up the story. Maya's phone hadn't stopped ringing with interview requests, but she'd declined them all. She had a different plan. Good morning, everyone, Maya began, her voice calm and authoritative as it carried across the digital network. I'm sure many of you have seen the videos from our Greenfield location this week. On screen, she could see dozens of small windows showing employees from various stores. Some looked curious, others nervous, and a few appeared defiant. She spotted Derek Morrison from the Riverside location in the 3rd row, his expression carefully neutral. Rather than let media speculation define this conversation, I wanted to speak directly to all of you about what happened, what it means, and what we're going to do about it. Maya clicked to her first slide, which showed the Sterling Retail mission statement. To serve every customer with respect, dignity, and excellence. This is our mission. It's posted in every break room, printed in every employee handbook, and it's supposed to guide every interaction we have with the people who choose to shop with us. But clearly, we have a problem. She clicked to the next slide, which showed statistics that made several employees shift uncomfortably in their chairs. In the past 6 months, we've received 43 formal complaints about discriminatory treatment in our stores. 38 of those complaints involved customers of color. 26 involved young people under 30. 15 involved both. The numbers hung in the digital air like an indictment. Maya could see employees looking down, checking their phones, or whispering to colleagues off camera. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern. And patterns don't happen by accident. They happen because of culture. Derek Morrison's face had hardened, and Maya noticed he was typing something, probably a message to other managers. Now I want to share something with you. Maya continued. During our investigation of the Greenfield incident, we discovered that some of our store managers have been encouraging what they call proactive loss prevention. She clicked to the next slide, which showed excerpts from internal emails and training materials. The language was carefully coded, but the intent was clear: target certain demographic groups for additional scrutiny. These materials came from our Riverside location, distributed by manager Derek Morrison. Derek's face appeared larger on screen as Maya highlighted his video window. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. Derek, would you like to explain to your colleagues why you instructed your team to pay special attention to customers who don't fit the typical customer profile? The silence stretched uncomfortably across the digital conference. Finally, Derek unmuted himself. Maya, I was just trying to reduce shrinkage. The Riverside location has been under pressure to improve our loss prevention numbers, and I was implementing industry best practices. Industry best practices for racial profiling? Maya interrupted. Because that's what you were teaching, Derek. You held training sessions where you showed employees photos of suspicious customers, and 90% of those photos showed people of color. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the video conference. Several employees were frantically taking notes, while others looked genuinely shocked. Furthermore, Maya continued, you created a reward system where employees received bonuses for catching shoplifters, which incentivized them to target customers based on appearance rather than actual suspicious behavior. Derek's face was red now. That's not. I never said to target people based on race. You didn't have to say it explicitly, Derek. When you show employees pictures of typical shoplifters and they're all young black men, when you tell them to watch out for urban fashion and baggy clothes, when you create financial incentives for catching thieves, what do you think happens? Maya clicked to another slide showing the results: complaint patterns, failed discrimination suits that had been quietly settled, and employee turnover rates that spiked after Derek's training sessions. What happens is exactly what happened to me at Greenfield. Employees start seeing criminals instead of customers. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle across the hundreds of screens. And it's not just Derek. We've found similar patterns at 4 other locations. Managers who've misinterpreted our focus on loss prevention as permission to profile customers. Employees who've been rewarded for harassment disguised as vigilance. Janet from Greenfield, the shift supervisor who'd complained about Brad's behavior, unmuted herself. Maya, some of us tried to report this. We filed complaints with HR, but nothing ever happened. You're absolutely right, Janet. And that's another part of the problem. Our HR processes were designed to protect the company from liability, not to protect customers from discrimination or employees from having to work in environments that contradicted their values. Maya clicked to a new slide titled, Immediate Changes. Effective immediately, we're implementing new policies across all Sterling retail locations. First, any employee training related to loss prevention must be approved by corporate HR and will focus on actual suspicious behaviors, not demographic profiling. She could see Derek and several other managers looking increasingly uncomfortable. Second, we're eliminating all financial incentives tied to apprehending suspected shoplifters. Loss prevention is important, but it cannot come at the cost of customer dignity. Third, we're establishing a direct reporting line to my office for any employee who witnesses or experiences discriminatory behavior. These reports will be investigated within 72 hours, and the results will be shared with all relevant parties. An employee from the Phoenix location unmuted herself. What about managers who've been encouraging this behavior? What happens to them? Maya's expression hardened. Anyone who has created, encouraged, or participated in discriminatory practices will face consequences ranging from mandatory retraining to termination, depending on the severity and scope of their actions. Derek Morrison's window suddenly went dark. He'd left the meeting. "Derek, I know you're still listening," Maya said calmly. "Leaving this meeting doesn't change the fact that you have a meeting with HR at 2 p.m. today." She clicked to her final slide. Building a better culture. "This incident has been embarrassing and painful for our company, but it's also an opportunity. We can choose to see this as a crisis, or we can see it as a chance to become the company we've always claimed to be." Maya looked directly into her camera, addressing each employee as if they were sitting across from her desk. "Every customer who walks into our stores is someone's mother, father, son, daughter, friend, or neighbor. They deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of their age, race, clothing, or economic status. That's not just good customer service, it's basic human decency." The video conference continued for another 30 minutes, with employees asking questions, sharing their own experiences, and discussing how to implement the new policies. By the end, Maya could see a shift in the digital room, from defensiveness and discomfort to engagement, and, in many cases, relief. 2 weeks after the company-wide meeting, Maya sat across from her head of human resources, Patricia Williams, in the same conference room where they'd held countless other personnel reviews. This one felt different, though, heavier with the weight of decisions that would reshape lives and careers. "Let's start with Brad Harrison," Patricia said, opening a thick file folder. "His employment history shows 3 formal complaints in 6 months, all involving alleged racial profiling. 2 customer service violations prior to his promotion to assistant manager. And now this incident with you." Maya nodded, though she felt no satisfaction in reviewing Brad's failures. "What did the full investigation reveal?" "It's worse than we initially thought," Patricia replied, pulling out a series of printed reports. "We interviewed 12 employees at Greenfield, and 7 of them confirmed witnessing Brad engage in discriminatory behavior toward customers. Some said they reported it to David Martinez multiple times. And David's response? That's where it gets complicated. David claims he counseled Brad verbally but never filed formal reports because he was following guidance from Derek Morrison about managing shrinkage through enhanced customer awareness." Maya leaned back in her chair, processing the information. "So David was caught between corporate pressure and employee complaints, and he chose to protect the company's bottom line instead of its customers." "Essentially, yes. But here's what's interesting. We also found employees who consistently pushed back against these practices." Patricia pulled out another file. Janet Rodriguez, the shift supervisor at Greenfield, filed 4 separate complaints about Brad's behavior. She also documented instances where she intervened to prevent similar incidents with other employees. "Tell me about Janet." 12 years with the company, excellent performance reviews, consistently rated highest in customer satisfaction scores. Her colleagues describe her as someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Maya made a note on her tablet. "She sounds like exactly the kind of employee we should be promoting." "There's more," Patricia continued. "During the investigation, we discovered that Janet had been passed over for promotion to assistant manager 3 times. The position went to Brad, who had less experience and weaker performance reviews. On what grounds? David cited Brad's aggressive approach to loss prevention as a key factor. Apparently, Derek Morrison had specifically recommended promoting employees who showed initiative in preventing theft." Maya felt the familiar anger building in her chest. The corruption ran deeper than she'd initially realized, not just encouraging discrimination, but actively rewarding it while punishing employees who maintained ethical standards. "What about Derek Morrison?" she asked. Patricia's expression darkened. "Derek's case is the most serious. We found evidence that he implemented similar training programs at 3 other locations. His methods resulted in multiple discrimination complaints, 2 threatened lawsuits that were quietly settled, and significant employee turnover. But his stores showed improved shrinkage numbers." Maya guessed. "Exactly. And that's what his superiors focused on. Derek received 2 performance bonuses in the past year specifically for innovative loss prevention strategies. Maya shook her head in disgust. So we were literally paying him to discriminate against our customers. It gets worse. We found emails where Derek bragged about his methods to other regional managers. He was essentially spreading this approach throughout the company. Patricia handed Maya a printed email chain. As Maya read Derek's messages, her anger turned to cold determination. In one email, Derek had written, "The key is teaching employees to trust their instincts about who belongs in an upscale store and who doesn't. Loss prevention is as much about psychology as it is about security. This is evidence of intentional discrimination," Maya said. "Not unconscious bias or poor training, deliberate, systematic targeting of customers based on race and class. Our legal department agrees. They're recommending immediate termination for Derek and any manager who implemented his training methods." "And Brad?" Patricia hesitated. "Brad's case is more complex. There's clear evidence of discriminatory behavior, but there's also evidence that he was following training he received from management. He genuinely seems to believe he was doing his job correctly." Maya considered this. "What has Brad said during the investigation?" "He's been cooperative, but also defensive. He keeps insisting that he was trained to be suspicious of certain types of customers. However, yesterday something changed." "Changed how?" "He requested a meeting with you. Said he had something important to discuss about what happened and what he's learned since then." Maya was surprised. "He wants to meet with me?" He seemed different. Less defensive, more reflective. He mentioned that he'd been talking to his family about what happened, and it had opened his eyes to some things he'd never considered before. Maya thought about this development. "What about the other employees involved in similar incidents?" "We identified 6 employees across 4 stores who had engaged in discriminatory practices. 3 of them showed genuine remorse and willingness to change. 2 became defensive and blamed company policies. 1 quit rather than face the investigation." "And the employees who stood up against these practices?" Patricia smiled for the first time during the meeting. 15 employees came forward during the investigation to report discriminatory behavior they'd witnessed. Most of them had tried to address it through proper channels but were ignored or discouraged by management. Like Janet. Exactly like Janet. And here's what's remarkable. Every single one of these employees has excellent customer service ratings and strong performance reviews. The correlation is clear. Employees who treat customers with respect and dignity are better at their jobs overall. Maya made another note. "We need to recognize these employees publicly and meaningfully. They maintained our values even when management was pressuring them to abandon those values." "I agree. But there's one more thing you should know about the employee response to your company-wide meeting." "What's that?" "We've received over 40 messages from employees thanking you for addressing this issue. Many of them shared personal stories about times they felt pressured to treat customers unfairly, or times they witnessed discrimination but felt powerless to stop it." Patricia handed Maya a stack of printed emails. "These employees are saying that for the first time in years, they feel proud to work for Sterling Retail again." Maya felt a surge of emotion as she scanned the messages. One email from a cashier in Phoenix read, "Thank you for making it clear that treating people with respect isn't just the right thing to do, it's company policy. I've been worried about speaking up, but now I know I have support from the top." Another message from a stock clerk in Boston said, "My little brother is black, and I've watched him get followed around stores just for existing. I never want any customer to feel that way in our stores. Thank you for taking a stand." "Patricia," Maya said finally, "I want you to schedule meetings with every employee who stood up against discrimination. And I want to personally meet with Brad if he's serious about having a conversation." "And Derek?" Maya's expression hardened. "Derek's termination hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. After that, I want a full audit of every manager he trained or influenced. This cancer has to be completely removed." As Patricia gathered her files, Maya reflected on the complexity of the situation. Yes, there would be consequences for those who had perpetuated discrimination. But there was also an opportunity to reward and elevate employees who had maintained their integrity despite pressure to compromise it. The real work of changing company culture was just beginning. Brad Harrison sat in the parking lot of Sterling Retail's corporate headquarters, his hands gripping the steering wheel of his 10-year-old Honda Accord. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, working up the courage to walk inside for his meeting with Maya Johnson. The same woman he'd humiliated, accused, and embarrassed just 3 weeks ago was about to decide his professional fate. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Michelle. "Remember what we talked about. Be honest. Own your mistakes. Good luck." The conversations with his family over the past few weeks had been the most difficult of his life. When the video of his confrontation with Maya went viral, he'd initially felt angry and defensive. It wasn't fair, he'd argued to anyone who would listen. He'd been doing his job the way he'd been trained. But then his 15-year-old nephew Marcus had watched the video. "Uncle Brad," Marcus had said quietly after seeing the footage, "that's how they treat me at the mall. Like I'm gonna steal something just because I'm black." Those words had hit Brad like a physical blow. Marcus was an honor student, played violin in the school orchestra, volunteered at their church's food bank. But Brad realized that none of that would matter to someone who saw only the color of his skin. "I never thought about it that way," Brad had admitted to his nephew. "I know," Marcus had replied, not unkindly. "Most white people don't have to think about it." That conversation had led to another with his sister Michelle, who worked as a nurse and had stories about black patients being treated differently by some of her colleagues. Then his mother had shared experiences from her teaching career, describing how some parents automatically assumed their black students were troublemakers. For the first time in his 32 years, Brad had begun to see the world through different eyes. He'd also started researching Maya Johnson online. Before the incident, he'd known nothing about the woman he'd accused except what his prejudices had told him. Now he learned about her journey from a scholarship kid at UConn to Harvard Business School to becoming the youngest CEO in Sterling Retail's history. He read interviews where she talked about breaking barriers and the responsibility that came with her position. The irony was crushing. He'd profiled and accused a woman who had worked twice as hard as most people to achieve her success, who had likely faced discrimination countless times in her climb to the top, who was now in a position to change things for others who looked like her. Taking a deep breath, Brad finally got out of his car and walked into the corporate building. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt endless. Maya's assistant, a kind woman named Carol, led him to a smaller conference room rather than Maya's intimidating corner office. When Maya entered a few minutes later, she looked professional but not hostile. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit that radiated the authority he'd been too blind to see in the grocery store. "Thank you for meeting with me," Brad said, standing awkwardly as she took a seat across from him. "Please sit down," Maya replied, her voice neutral. "You said you had something important to discuss." Brad had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, but now that he was face to face with her, the words felt inadequate. "I wanted to apologize," he began. "Not just for what I did to you, but for not understanding what I was really doing." Maya studied his face carefully. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that I convinced myself I was preventing theft, but I was really just targeting people who didn't look like me. People I'd decided didn't belong." He paused, gathering courage to continue. "I talked to my nephew about what happened. He's 15 and black, and he told me about how security guards follow him around stores, how teachers assume he's going to cause trouble, how people cross the street when they see him coming." Maya's expression softened slightly, but she remained silent, letting him continue. "I realized that what I did to you wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something bigger, something that's been happening to people like my nephew his whole life. And I was part of it." "What made you want to meet with me?" Maya asked. "Because I need you to know that I understand now. Really understand. And because I want to do something about it." "What kind of something?" Brad leaned forward, his voice becoming more earnest. "I know I'm probably going to lose my job, and I accept that. But I was thinking, maybe there's a way I could help fix the problem I helped create." Maya raised an eyebrow. "How?" I could talk to other employees, share my story, explain how easy it is to convince yourself you're doing the right thing when you're actually hurting people. Brad's words came faster now, fueled by genuine conviction. I know what the training from Derek Morrison was like. I know how he made discrimination sound like good business practice. I could help identify the warning signs, help other people recognize their own biases before they act on them. You want to become an advocate against the very behavior you were engaging in? Yes. Because I know how it happens. I know how someone can convince themselves they're being vigilant when they're really being prejudiced. And maybe that perspective could help prevent other people from making the same mistakes. Maya was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. Brad, what you did was serious. It hurt me personally, damaged our company's reputation, and reinforced harmful stereotypes that have real consequences for people of color. I know, Brad said quietly. And I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. But, Maya continued, the fact that you've taken the time to understand the broader implications of your actions, that you've listened to your family and genuinely reflected on your behavior, that suggests something important. What's that? That people can change. That bias isn't necessarily permanent if someone is willing to do the hard work of confronting it. Maya stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I've been thinking a lot about accountability versus opportunity. How do we hold people responsible for harmful behavior while also creating space for growth and change? She turned back to Brad. Here's what I'm thinking. Your employment at Greenfield is terminated. That's not negotiable. Your actions created a hostile environment for customers and put the company at legal risk. Brad nodded, having expected this outcome. However, Maya continued, I'm willing to offer you something different. A position in our corporate training department, working specifically on anti-bias education. It would mean taking a pay cut, starting at the bottom of a new career track, and subjecting yourself to extensive additional training. Brad's eyes widened in surprise. You'd give me another chance? I'd give you an opportunity to earn redemption through action. To prove that your reflection and understanding are genuine by helping others avoid the mistakes you made. But why? After what I did to you. Maya sat back down, her expression serious but not unkind. Because I believe that sustainable change happens when people who've made mistakes become advocates for doing better. You understand the mindset that leads to discrimination because you've lived it. That gives you credibility with employees who might dismiss lectures from someone who's never faced those temptations. Brad felt tears starting to form in his eyes. I don't deserve this. This isn't about what you deserve, Brad. It's about what's best for our customers, our employees, and our company. If you can help prevent even one person from experiencing what I experienced, then this decision will have been worth it. I won't let you down, Brad said, his voice thick with emotion. The real test won't be your gratitude, Maya replied. It will be your willingness to do the difficult, ongoing work of examining your own biases and helping others do the same. Are you prepared for that? Yes, ma'am. I am. As Brad left the building an hour later, after signing paperwork for his new position and scheduling his first training sessions, he felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Not just for his own future, but for the possibility that people could actually change, that mistakes could become stepping stones to something better. He thought about his nephew Marcus, about all the young people who shouldn't have to grow up being viewed with suspicion. Maybe, just maybe, he could play a small part in changing that. 6 months later, Maya stood at the entrance of the newly renovated Greenfield Market, watching as customers moved freely through the aisles without the weight of suspicious stares or unwelcome attention. The store looked the same on the surface, but everything about the atmosphere had changed. Ms. Johnson, welcome back, said Janet Rodriguez, adjusting the store manager name tag on her shirt with obvious pride. After Derek Morrison's termination and a company-wide restructuring, Janet had been promoted to run the Greenfield location, becoming the first Latina manager in the district. How are things going, Janet? Maya asked, genuinely curious about the progress they'd made. Better than I ever imagined, Janet replied with a warm smile. Our customer satisfaction scores are up 30%, employee retention is at an all-time high, and believe it or not, our shrinkage numbers have actually improved since we stopped profiling customers. Maya wasn't surprised by the last statistic. When employees focused on actual suspicious behavior rather than demographic assumptions, they became better at identifying real threats to inventory. They walked through the store together, and Maya noticed the small but significant changes. Employees made genuine eye contact with customers, offered help without hovering, and treated every person who walked through the doors with the same level of respect and service. "Mrs. Johnson!" called out a familiar voice. Maya turned to see the elderly woman who had witnessed the original confrontation, now approaching with a genuine smile. "I wanted to thank you for what you did. My grandson Deshaun shops here now, and he says he's never been followed or hassled. He actually likes coming here. That means everything to me," Maya replied, remembering how important it was that change be measured not in corporate policies but in real human experiences. As they continued their tour, Janet pointed out the new employee training materials displayed in the break room. "Brad Harrison developed most of these with our corporate team," she explained. "His workshops on recognizing unconscious bias have been incredibly effective. Turns out, having someone who's made these mistakes teach others how to avoid them really resonates with people." Maya had been following Brad's progress closely. His transformation from discriminatory employee to passionate advocate had been remarkable to witness. His training sessions, which combined personal accountability with practical education, had been rolled out to all Sterling retail locations with impressive results. "How do employees respond to learning from Brad?" Maya asked. "At first, some were skeptical," Janet admitted. "But when he shares his own story, when he talks about how easy it was to convince himself he was doing the right thing while actually hurting people, it opens eyes. He doesn't lecture from a position of superiority. He teaches from a place of humility and genuine change." They paused near the customer service desk, where a young black man was exchanging a product without any hassle or additional scrutiny. Maya watched the interaction, remembering her nephew Marcus and how different his shopping experiences could be now. "The ripple effects have been amazing," Janet continued. "Other stores in the district have started requesting our training materials. Some of our employees have become advocates in their communities, talking to friends and family about bias and assumptions." Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Brad. "Just finished training session at Phoenix location." Store manager said it was the most impactful employee development they'd ever had. 3 employees stayed after to share their own stories about times they'd made assumptions about customers. "Real change is happening." She showed the message to Janet, who smiled. "You know, when all this first happened, I thought it would destroy the store's reputation. Instead, it's made us stronger." "How so?" "Customers trust us now. They know we've looked honestly at our problems and fixed them. We get people driving from other towns to shop here because they've heard we treat everyone with respect." As they completed their walkthrough, Maya reflected on the journey from that humiliating afternoon 6 months ago to this moment of genuine progress. The incident that could have ended her career and damaged the company permanently had instead become a catalyst for meaningful change. "Maya," Janet said as they reached the exit, "I know what happened to you here was terrible, but I'm grateful it led to all this. Our employees are proud to work here again. Our customers feel welcome. And kids like Deshaun can shop without fear." Maya looked back at the store one more time, watching a diverse group of customers, young and old, all races and backgrounds, shopping with dignity and comfort. This was what retail was supposed to be, a place where everyone felt valued and welcome. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Maya said finally. "What's that?" "That we proved change is possible. Real, sustainable change. Not just policy adjustments or sensitivity training, but a fundamental shift in how we see and treat each other." Her phone rang. It was her assistant, reminding her of the board meeting where she'd present the quarterly results. Customer satisfaction was up across all locations, employee turnover was down, and despite the initial negative publicity, sales had actually increased as words spread about Sterling Retail's commitment to respectful service. But more importantly, she had dozens of stories like Deshawn's, customers who now felt comfortable shopping in their stores, employees who felt proud of their workplace, and communities that saw Sterling Retail as a company that lived its values. As Maya drove back to corporate headquarters, she thought about the speech she'd give to the board. She wouldn't focus on the financial gains or the positive media coverage that had eventually replaced the initial negative publicity. Instead, she'd talk about justice, not as a moment of punishment or retribution, but as an ongoing commitment to building systems that protected dignity, created opportunity, and recognized the humanity in every person who walked through their doors. The young woman who had been humiliated and profiled in a grocery store had become the leader who transformed an entire company culture. But the real victory wasn't personal. It was the knowledge that thousands of customers would now be treated with the respect they deserved, and that other companies would follow their example. Justice, Maya had learned, wasn't about correcting one moment of wrongdoing. It was about building a future where such moments became impossible.